Welcome back to This Is Working. I'm Dan Roth, LinkedIn's editor-in-chief. On this show, we talk to professionals who have a significant impact on how we live and how we work, and who are changing how we deal with society and what's coming next. Today, we have with us Baron Davis. When Baron Davis was in the NBA, he was known for breaking records. He's a two-time NBA All-Star with a pro sports career spanning a rare 13 years. He played for the Hornets, the Warriors, the Clippers. Baron was unstoppable. And when he finally did stop, when he retired from basketball, he became a different kind of hotshot. He sunk his teeth in a philanthropic work, and he founded 3 different companies. He's invested in brands like Vitaminwater and Thrive Market, and in December, he made headlines when he and rapper Master P were rumored to be in talks to buy Reebok from Adidas. Now he's hoping to help young entrepreneurs of color by sharing tips and advice from his playbook. And with that, let's bring on Baron Davis. Hey, Baron.
Hi. Good to see you, buddy. How are
you? Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us here today. I got to ask, we talked in that intro a little bit about Reebok, and you were all over the headlines in December. What's the latest?
Just still, our mission is still the same, to be able to position ourselves to have, that conversation and really pull together our culture. And we feel like, these industries have been, basically reaping the benefits off of, Black and brown and people of color and women, who are the purchasers, the marketers, the creatives, the manufacturers. And so for us, it's just a golden opportunity for us to get in front, of Adidas and be able to present, our plan for, opportunities for people of color to have, a seat at the table.
That's so interesting. I didn't realize how much of this was a social mission, even beyond a financial one. You see this as being something that you will enable you to bring back jobs, money to bring new career opportunities to people who aren't getting them right now?
Yes, I feel, when you have an opportunity like this, you look at, everybody's looking at the big brand, right? And thinking about, the big pie in the sky. But when you start thinking about all the jobs and the opportunities and the people that you can affect, all the chances, for new designers, for people, people of color working in, executive positions, right? New marketing companies, agencies, just looking at the whole chain of command, when we're looking at any business, especially corporate America, and looking at, where can we start the incubation process? Where can we start teaching, and what better place than industries and subject matters that we know and we participate in?
It's so interesting. And we see this constantly on LinkedIn as people feeling like they are banging their heads against a closed door, that they're saying, I've got all this talent. I can, and even we see this especially in the shoe world. I see this all the time where people will say, like, I've got these designs. I don't even know how to get in. I don't know how to. This is something that is how I think about myself and something I'm passionate about. And I'm a designer, and I can't figure out a way to get in the door.
Right.
Is that something that you are trying to do more widely? You have so many businesses. How do you think about what you're doing now that you have been off the court for a number of years? How do you think about what you're doing as being something that can open the door for others?
Well, I've been extremely fortunate, in my life, in my career, and ever since I was a child, having opportunities in LA to go to private school, go to UCLA, and so I've always paid it forward. And I think now the opportunity is to invest in the next generation, and that's education. Those boot camps, financial boot camps, that's getting out there and being a part of the community so these kids can, see you, touch you, talk to you, ask you questions about, your career, where you are now. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do is we can start, incubating and changing our conversation that we're having with the youth, right? And giving them cheat codes to understand, the economics of business, right? the financial literacy, in banking and savings and things like that. So there's different ways to translate it. And I think experience is the best teacher. And for us, if we can start incubating, at a small level, thinking about, our community first, then we're going to find, the next great talent and be able to manufacture that and see that talent, get to where they're supposed to.
All right, this is working. We are on with NBA All-Star and entrepreneur and philanthropist Baron Davis. Baron, we got some people coming in from the stream just saying hello. Marivel from Washington, Karen from Sweden, Asfa from California, Christina in Massachusetts. So people are pouring into the stream here, just announcing where they're from and saying hi. Let's stay on that financial literacy question. It's something you've really been focused on lately. Will you talk about some of your efforts in that area?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of putting my money where my mouth is. I invested in UNES, which is a 529 fintech platform for college savings and family gifting. And I also invested in Goal Setter. And Goal Setter is a fintech learning platform and gamification platform for teens and tweens to learn, savings, and they get to spend off their own debit account by answering quizzes and things like that. And we talk often about the word financial literacy, and I think with what Goal Setter is doing, um, what UNES is doing is for us to really start to create language, right? That can be you know um, almost like an inviting language to people in the urban community, right? And so we have to do a better job, right, of the next generation of leaders and of entrepreneurs, especially in financial literacy. It's helping us understand what financial literacy is, right? And so sometimes words can be, barbed wire. And for us, in our ecosystem and, the way that we think is we have to remove that barbed wire. We have to take financial literacy and create financial understandings, financial storytelling, financial content, right? Those are the things that we should be, teaching, because these kids learn through experience. They learn through creating content. They learn through games. So we have to meet them at their level. And that's why I'm super excited about, both of these companies and the mission that they're on.
When you say these words are barbed wire, is the idea that they keep people out? You hear these phrases and you're like, I don't know what they mean, and so this is a world that's not for me.
Yeah, I would say even when I was in the NBA, they come with the financial literacy program, and it's like financial and literacy. Like, to me, that didn't even go together, right? So you automatically, kind of turn a deaf ear to it. And so we need to just think about the way that we, you know, invite people to learn about finance, right? To learn about, the education of finance and what it means. Instead of a lot of times just, sticking with words and having words trend and become like the stereotypes for what we get people to kind of learn under. So, for me, it's always like, all right, what is financial literacy? So I have to figure out what that was.
Hmm.
And then now I have to translate that, for myself and for the people who I can understand and who share the same, goals and characteristics as far as investing in life after basketball or life inside of sports.
And when did you realize that this was an education that you needed, or have you always understood this?
I was my own agent when I was 21 years old. And so I've pretty much had to learn to manage my own career, my own money, pick the right managers. And so it's been like learning on the fly. And, I invested in myself, when I was young in the NBA. The companies and the things that I invested in, I treated that like going to business school and paying for business school. So it's in my DNA, so to speak. And I think now for me is really just kind of using my life story and my trajectory in the league to be storyteller and a pioneer and a translator to all the young kids that are coming up now.
So can you give us, first of all, Bob says, what a gift to hear his perspective. And Damon says, thank you for building wealth in your communities. A lot of people just really responding to what you're talking about here. If there are other people who are watching this and saying, I want to be a translator, I want to understand how to talk to young people or people who don't understand financial literacy, don't even understand, they hear, as you were saying, they hear these two terms together and they're like, I don't care about either of those two terms. I'm not going to get invested here. How do you translate that? How do you remove the barbed wire? What are some of the ways that you talk about it that young people or people who aren't around this understand and say, yeah, I need to get this?
It's almost like the lemonade stand parable that we use, right? Kids go start a lemonade stand, go to the grocery store, you buy your lemons, how many cups can you get? And then if you start taking that all the way up the chain and saying, you know what, people really love this lemonade. Now you have to make more, right? Now you have to create a brand out of it, and we can explain, lemonade, right? As an example, from Paul Newman to Simply Made, all the way to my kids opening up a lemonade stand. And so if we can kind of create those narratives, right, where we can actually show and actually react to, and it feels like it's a part of our life, then that's where we need to just cut to the chase and get to the point, right? And use examples like that to explain to our youth, the power of saving, the power of being an entrepreneur, right? And all those intangibles.
And when you were in the NBA, how did you think about this idea of creating wealth that would last beyond your career? Or did you know that when you got out of the NBA, you would then start figuring out what comes next? How intentional were you in thinking about what your career path was going to be like once you left basketball?
Super intentional. I would say that kind of led me to the Vitaminwater deal. I looked at, there was Sprite, there was Powerade, there was Gatorade, and everybody was taking these 6-figure deals. And, I looked at Vitaminwater and I said, here's a golden opportunity that if I invest in this company, right, then I can turn down a 6-figure deal, but this company will go far beyond where I am in my career. And at that time I was an all-star. And so, I just thought about if I can, be a part of this and use my platform to introduce people to this brand, I'd love to see where it goes. And then, shout out to the Vitaminwater team at the time. They took me under their wing and really showed me, let me get involved in the marketing and the branding and just really kept me exposed to every trajectory, every route that they took, to get to their exit. And so with that, I just start thinking about, I'm probably not going to win an NBA championship. I'm probably not going to be a 10-time All-Star. Different people have different paths, and so I need to be thinking about other things and being able to walk away from this game and not rely on this game, where I have to play through an injury or I have to play through, a lot of mental stress and things like that that comes with that. And so, earlier in my career, I was always thinking about saving. I was scared, but I was always looking at, where are these opportunities that exist that I can use my platform to connect and invest in.
I remember years ago, I talked to Junior Bridgman, NBA great, who talked about just absolutely having to drill this into NBA players, saying you are going to focus, you got to focus on what comes next, like always. And then he owned huge numbers of Wendy's. He became really successful there. And
he just bought Ebony.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So when good question coming in from Jose, who says, how do you identify new business opportunities and what system metrics do you use to measure its potential and viability?
Instincts. I think instincts and connectivity, the way we look at it is, one, I was taught to invest in the entrepreneur. And, if you really like an entrepreneur, that it may not be their first, the first one may not work, but if you built the right relationship, and you believe that they'll be successful, then, you should always invest in the people. And then next you should look at the business and think about, where does this business make sense, right? And where in the, where in the world in their ecosystem do they fit? And then third, I think, which is, our secret sauce is how can we help amplify and connect and help this company skip the line, right? And if we can do that, that means we fully understand it. And we have people in our ecosystem, in our network, that could be advisors and other investors, or champions of that company. And so, that's kind of like our three pillars that we look through. And then I would say the fourth one is what kind of impact, who's on your cap table, who's in, in your company, right? And are you hiring women? Are you hiring people of color, right? What is your take on and your view and your point of view on, humanity, right? And, things like that I think are super important for us because it's important to build the right ecosystem. And my mission was to look at minority as a different word and flip that to the majority. And so, taking this word minority and saying that, there's a lot more of us, right, that are more like-minded if we're a minority, to move together. And so just, sorting through that stuff and just kind of really basing it on instincts and also on, the smartest people, let them vet it and get their, their information and notes. So, we're fully detailed and, it all comes with, like I would say, our playbook.
It's a great playbook. So it's instincts, market, where amplify, and humanity, sort of the key components of it.
Absolutely.
All right, I want to give some more shout outs from people in the crowd here. We have hellos from Patrick in Kenya, Christian in Ohio, Antonio from Texas, Rosa in Illinois, EC in Michigan, and Fernando from Chile. So you're getting a worldwide crowd here.
All right,
I want to go back to your point about amplify and what in the last year, and on this show, we've talked a lot about this, is the role the business has started to play in amplifying messages of racial inequality, as you talk about, represent humanity. How do you make sure that your companies are not just giving back and being good for the environment, but actually doing positive things that make the world better in terms of who you're hiring and who you're sourcing from? What role do you think athletes have to play in that, if any at all?
I think that the athletes are super important. When you think about, sports and what sports has been in its entirety of, I would say the Olympics, let's say, going back to the Olympics, sports has always been the peacemaker. Sports has, probably been the most inclusive. And, when you look at the role of an athlete, you look at somebody who, people want to say like we are not capable or we shouldn't, but, we actually live it, right? We are the most connected to the fans, right?
Yeah.
They know our face, they see our face. We're out at restaurants, they're high-fiving us, they're, talk, it's conversation, it's sometimes they're walking up, bumping chests, and then we come from these places, right? So a lot of us, we can identify with each other because even the guys from overseas, we all come from, places that, where we've been marginalized, right? And, even as an athlete, I think a lot of times we get marginalized by just the sport we play. And so I think it's super important for all athletes to speak up because they're highly intelligent, they're sensitive, they're empathetic, and usually, we're the ones who are also marginalized as well. And so we have, a role and a responsibility to stick up for the people.
Alex just wrote in that he says he's a huge fan of your presence on the court during the We Believe Warriors squad. Juliet says, thank you for making the time to share with us. The not just speaking up, but also standing firm for certain beliefs. And I'm curious what your take is on college athletes getting paid. I know California's made some progress in this area, or kind of moved you had some run-ins with the NCAA.
Yeah.
And what's your take? Should these college athletes be getting paid? Are things
Absolutely.
moving fast enough? What do you think?
They should. I think it's super important that college athletes get paid because they don't have any resources, right? And so, you get injured. I remember getting injured at UCLA, and I had to pay for my own surgery because I needed to go to a doctor that I knew, could do my surgery where I have a chance to make it to the NBA. And so I had to take a loan out, right, in order to pay for my surgery because I did not want the UCLA doctors to work on my knee because of the other athletes that were seniors and juniors. They were just like, yo, bro, like, get a second opinion, and so you learn from your peers. And then, you start thinking about the time that you have off, right? You think about the money and the resources that the school is making, right? Education is great, but what happens after school, right? What happens to that number one player that, you've made millions and millions of dollars off their jersey and they don't make it to the league, right? They have to start over, right? And so a lot of times I just think that, the athletes are always being force fed like, hey, you get a free education, but think about, the responsibility that they have for the school and the responsibility that they have for themselves it's different than a normal student. It's more you're in a professional arena in a professional setting, and everyone is benefiting off of it except for the athletes.
Except for the athletes, right? I got some questions related to that. Mitchell, Alex, and Brian all asked, what should a rising college athlete learn first? Contracts, compensation. If you were putting together your own course of study for these athletes in college, what would you say is like, hey, these are the 101 courses?
I would say savings. We would start with savings, right? And just show how, putting your money in the bank, how that can, one, just like build you a nest egg. And then I think at that point, you work from your savings to your taxes. Then you work from your taxes to your investing. Then you work from your investing to, who you are, right? What is your DNA? What is your makeup? What are the products that you're using? What are the products that you're drinking? Where are the places that you're going? And then you start to explain, stocks and things like that. I think as it pertains to the lifestyle of the athlete and what their interests are. And I think that's a better way. That's how I start to learn and understand it. And now I invest in companies that, I use. There are companies that I'm a fan of, and I think it's paying off well.
That's great. Baron, I got one last question for you. Right before we went on, you pulled out a trophy that was, I think, a Domino's trophy. Is that right? You want to get that? Can we just see that again? What
World
was
Domino champion.
so I know that you're a big Domino's fan, and you have a movie coming out about this. Is that when's it coming?
Late March, early April. I just directed my first feature. It's called Domino Battle of the Bones. I grew up on dominoes. I think that one, it's a great game to play to teach numbers. My kid, he's 5, and the other one is 6, and so we have domino games. And to me, I wanted to create, like an urban comedy similar to a Friday, right? That would show like where I was from, the people that I grew up with, but just kind of, I think the world needs, to laugh and to kind of make fun of itself right now. And, that's what I wanted to be my directorial debut.
That's terrific. And has the pandemic changed how you are distributing that or how it comes out?
Well, we're going to drive-in theaters, so that's the cool part. Obviously, the pandemic has kind of slowed a lot of things down, but we'll be in theaters, in drive-in theaters, and then we'll be on all streaming and VOD.
That's terrific. Baron, thank you so much for joining us. This was such a great conversation.
I
think
really
we all learned a
appreciate
lot.
it. This has been awesome. Thank you, Dan.
All right. That was Baron Davis, NBA All-Star, philanthropist, entrepreneurs, and domino champion. You can catch this Every week we put out a podcast for This Is Working. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can get more advice from the world's top leaders by subscribing to my newsletter using the link you see on the screen. We're also going to put a link to that in the chat, so you should see it there. Go and click subscribe, and then make sure you check out the podcast on Saturday, leave some reviews, and then come back for the next This Is Working. It's terrific seeing you all here. Catch you next time.